Everybody here?
Here anyway.
Okay. Yeah, welcome to our next session. I'm Christian Schmitz.
And I am Ingrid Andersson. Most welcome. Very happy to see you all here.
I'm the founder of PDIE Group. PDIE stands for Purpose-Driven Innovation Ecosystem. Today we talk about global ecosystems, local action, financing innovation for planetary health. We have 3 outstanding innovators here. All the 3 of them have been nominated for the Earthshot Prize. PDIE is an official Earthshot Prize nominator as well. And we have been fortunate to have so far 7 finalists and 2 winners in the first 4 years of this 10 years initiative, which was initiated here at the World Economic Forum in 2020 by Prince William and Sir David Attenborough. So our passion is to look around the world, find the best innovators, and then help to scale these innovations so that we can tackle our crises. And we focus on the environmental challenges, climate change, biodiversity, and you have a lot of different topics around these themes. We have energy transition, decarbonization, food and agriculture, transportation. We have circular economy and water. And today we have 3 innovators who I will ask to the stage soon. But before that, Ingrid will also, we are collaborating together on this event, also with Go Nature Positive and Green Up, of course, here the Climate Hub.
Yes.
So Ingrid.
Yeah, thank you very much, Christian. I'm very happy to be here, and here I'm representing IKED. IKED is a Swedish think tank, and IKED stands for International Organization for Knowledge Economy and Enterprise Development. So we work with knowledge economy means innovation, learning a lot about new things and working with startups. And also we try to connect with the finance sector. And we have noticed that there is a big gap between the startups, the innovators, and how they actually can attain both the investments from the private sector or a blended finance model, but also to scale and to reach out to new markets. So it needs that we can drive the demand. The demand is not only from the consumers, but it's also from governments, it's from cities that and local regions that will invest and actually buy and purchase this and use these new products that are coming out on the market. So today we will have the session with the innovators and we listen to them the first. And then the second panel will be people that have a connection to the finance world or to the world that more works with the market, and they will try to close the gap between these. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. So in the end, we hopefully come to some conclusions, and we will hopefully learn something new. And there are so many different financing mechanisms, and very often startup founders are not aware of these kind of mechanisms, especially if you also scale your solution into the so-called developing world or the global south. So without further ado, I call Stephanie Fini, Kunihiro Shimoji. Actually, I forgot to mention that I'm also from Japan. I don't look Japanese, but I'm based in Tokyo. And Shimoji-san is from Okinawa, which is a southern island. So please come up to the stage. And Ingrid, you can
Yes.
wait.
Yes, I will wait. I will wait here. Wait.
One more. Prasoon Kumar. I didn't see you. then we take a seat. You can sit like this here, and so everybody has a microphone. Yes. So you can see already behind. Maybe we should switch the lady in the middle, and then yeah. So all the three of you, please give a short introduction about your startup, and then also tell us where you are with your startup, how you actually tackle the issue of financing, and what kind of hurdles you have been facing so far. Kunihiro.
Hello, konnichiwa. My name is Kunishi Moji from Japan. And also, actually, our startup is from India as well. EF Polymer, means eco-friendly polymer, produces 100% natural polymer, biodegradable polymer by upcycling waste such as orange peels and banana peels. 100% natural polymer is the only one that we produce existed in world at this moment. We help farmers who are suffering from water scarcity. 40% of the world population is facing water scarcity. 70% of the water that's available for human use is actually used for agriculture. So combined, many farmers are facing severe drought. So that's what we are doing. Currently, we're doing the Series B fundraising, aiming for 20 million USD. So we're aiming high and then try to get that money. Yeah, thank you.
Actually, if you mentioned 20 million for Series B, and depending on the region actually where you raise funding, 20 million for Series B is not so much money.
Right, exactly.
And I also wanted to mention, they started with a very interesting initiative called Climate Launchpad, and also they were established at OIST, Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology, which is a prestigious project in Japan, established by the Japanese government around 2008. So it's a graduate university, and they have hired a couple of Nobel Prize winners. And after the Climate Launchpad, which we are also hosting in Japan as PDIE Group, they got their first funding. So Stephanie, maybe you can explain what you're doing.
Yes, thank you very much. And I think it's great to aim high. That's absolutely where one should start. My name is Stephanie Feeney. I'm the co-founder of a company called DNAir. We are a biodata company. So we help sustainability and biodiversity professionals who are working in organizations in land and biodiversity intensive sectors to make evidence-based decision making. And we do that by collecting data about non-human species on Earth. So all of the plants, all of the animals, all of the insects, all of the pollinators, the invasive species and the rare and endangered species. And we take that data and we turn it into data products so that these people have got access to quality and timely data that helps them to do things like reporting to stakeholders, rolling out programs, managing scale up of programs within their companies. We are at a much earlier stage than you are. We are a so-called sort of deep tech startup. So there has been a number of years of research have gone into DNAir. And we're now just at the point of making that big leap from out of academia and into sort of commercialization, which is quite a big leap to make. So we're in the so-called sort of pre-seed stage of our journey.
That's great. So billion bricks, what does that mean?
Yep. Thank you for having me here. So I founded Billion Bricks in 2020, and Billion Bricks was founded to say that housing is a very big crisis, and it has remained a big crisis for decades. And the fact that the number of people without homes continues to increase means we cannot solve it. And we find that the amount of money flowing into housing or affordable housing has been stagnant for the last 2 decades, while climate change has become very fashionable, and that's where the money is flowing in. So we came up with this idea of doing net zero homes that now attracts climate capital into housing. And the concept is that affordable housing is stuck because it's not very profitable. And we build houses with a large solar roof on it, and we sell the solar energy to generate additional revenue for the developers so they can make more money on it. And we also share part of the profits with the homeowners, making housing more affordable for them. So if they were to buy a house somewhere else of a similar size, a Billion Bricks house will be about 20% cheaper. And we pay that 20% mortgage for them over the next 25 years. This has been part of a longish journey for me as well. I founded Billion Bricks originally as a non-profit with R&D base to come up with these new ideas. And in 2020, like I mentioned, we became a for-profit organization that's now building these communities in the Philippines. We have raised just under $3 million in the last 3 to 4 years. And we are now looking to raise, I thought I'll say 5 million, but I think maybe we'll do 20 as well. And I think the biggest challenge has been that we are very capital intensive and we work with very, very poor communities. And as a result, the margins are low and the risk is very high. And hence, raising financing for us is very, very hard, even though a lot of people relate to what we do, but their ability to have the risk appetite and stay with us over long term is very limited.
So we have a great diversity here on the panel. We have agriculture, biodiversity, and housing, and also the built environment contributes more than 40% to the greenhouse gas emissions. So now I would like to address with each of you your mid and long-term goals. What are you foreseeing for the next steps? For example, expanding internationally or scaling up faster. What are the needs, and how do you think to tackle this? Also, especially creating revenues on the one hand side, creating impact, and then how to actually get to the financing sources. What is your strategy for this?
Thank you. So as I mentioned, we're based in Japan as a headquarter. We have a manufacturing site and subsidiary in India. And then since 2021, as we started the sales of our product to the farmers, we have sold over 400 tons to the farmers, over 20,000 farmers. Majority of it is actually in India. But when it comes to earning money, making money in that market, we started to start our business in Japan, which we actually we sell it 5 to 6 times higher. They still purchase
higher price.
And then also we're trying to enter into the European market, which is 3-4 times higher than India, and we're trying to go into Thailand, which is similar to India. So balancing our earning, making money. But majority is India, but we're trying to balance that out by approaching to other markets so that we can actually continue our business and expansion in India side as well. To do that, equity financing is critical, but at the same time, we're trying to approach the more subsidies and international philanthropy and such. So that type of conversation, we just come up with ideas, but I don't know how we approach those international markets. For example, we got support from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in India, but can we do the similar in Thailand? I don't know. So that type of concerns we're having, but we're trying to approach different market because agriculture will take time to see the impact, so that we're diversifying it to different market to make money differently.
Can you give us a little bit a hint to what kind of pricing you are selling the films, these polymer films?
So it's just a powder, granule, powder and then granule. So farmers can just, in India, they spray it by hand. Smaller farmers are actually making the ROI. We're selling it around like 200 rupees per kilogram, which require for 20 kilogram is a requirement doses for 1 hectare. So we're generating repeating customer even in India. and they were making actually margin money out of that business as well. So, we're trying to, as I said, 5 times, 6 times higher in Japan. It's interesting, but to see Japanese people are actually a little richer than So
we will highlight the impact which you're creating in the last question. To you also the same question, your mid and long-term goals and.
Long-term goals are hard, I think, in the beginning when it's such
in the beginning it's
early stage. I've got short-term and mid-term goals, I could say. We have a hardware and software business, so also capital intensive, maybe not as capital intensive as Billion Bricks. And so as we make that move from sort of the research environment to commercialization, there's still quite a heavy research and product development piece to what we need to do. And so we feel sometimes like we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place of not having access to research, like academic research funding, and not being interesting enough yet, or still being too risky for even early stage, let's say VC funding, because we kind of get asked the question of, what's the early feedback from customers? And actually, we need to roll out the tech and have it in place for a little while before we can sort of collect that feedback yet. So,
who would be your customers? If, for example, if there's somebody in the audience who could,
great. So we are focused on, like I said, the land-intensive sector, so the sort of food and ag sector, conservation organizations, governments that need to think about how they're tracking against things like the Global Biodiversity Framework, any sort of land-intensive operations who need to better understand what the risks are around biodiversity and species management. So we are talking to such potential end users, and they are interested. And we have the challenge of needing to find co-finance for pilot projects because of those sort of large upfront costs, especially in this early stage. And as an early stage founder, I also, you don't also want to give up too much equity in the beginning, right? This is also the kind of dichotomy that you have. You want to stay close to your vision. You're concerned about giving up too much control. So just that dance of finding the right money at the right time, which is why we're focused as much as possible on non-dilutive funding right now. But we absolutely know that that will only take us so far. So blended financing, that's super attractive and interesting for us. So if anybody knows where it is, because I really struggle to find it. I hear a lot about the term. It's a buzzword. There's a lot of sort of discussion around it, but where do you find it?
Hopefully today. We will take this up in the second session where we have people from the finance industry speaking, and there will be also somebody speaking about blended finance, I think. Yeah. So, but your biodiversity solution, how is it received when you actually explain that you can detect from the air the different species?
Yes. So. Believe it or not, the air around us is an alphabet soup of genetic materials. So every living species, as it moves around in the wind or bodily movement, leaves teeny tiny traces of DNA behind in the air. And that is, if they're small enough, they're suspended in the air. And our technology is able to capture that DNA. We then analyze it in a lab, digitalize it, and turn it into data products for people who need access to high quality and cost effective data on very granular data on biodiversity. So how do people react to it? Sometimes with disbelief, because the science is pretty novel and new behind this. So there is definitely a bit of education that we need to do to sort of explain the technology to people. And so there is kind of that initial explaining piece. And then there's the sort of who is it for, how will people use it? But it's generally, I mean, right now, the whole, of course, topic of biodiversity is super hot. I can say that we have regular incoming interest from VCs without even going out to sort of talk to them, just because I think the topic is super on trend. But it's figuring out what to do with that interest and what the timing of that should be is my challenge as a early stage founder. Yeah.
Thank you. So Prasoon, tell us about your mid and long-term goals. Also a little bit geographically, at the moment you are active in the Philippines, and we were talking a little bit that you might also want to expand in other regions. And what are your plans for this, and how do you want to tackle the financial challenge also to do that?
So I think the founding principle behind Billion Bricks is to say that we don't want to be doing a few thousand houses or a few 100,000 or 1,000,000 houses. We want to say that can we tackle the problem and end it once and for all. So today there's a need for about 360 million homes across the world. So our vision is really to say, okay, can we make sure that we can have the audacity to think of a vision to say, okay, can we create a movement through which 360 million homes could be built? If Google can have the audacity to say that I want to organize the entire knowledge and information in the world, then why can't we have a similar level of audacity as well? And we think that one methodology of doing so could be what Tesla has done in terms of bringing out an EV car, which was commercially viable. People wanted to build it. And then others could follow in as well, and that has really transformed the industry on the automaker side. So we think that if we could be similarly pioneers in these net zero homes, which are affordable, which are commercially viable, then we could potentially transform the industry, where we are starting in the Philippines as the first base country. We have ourselves identified about 15 countries in the world where there's a large need for affordable housing, plus they have open markets to sell the energy like we do, and that accounts for about 40% of the market, or 45% of the market globally as well. So we think that once we've tackled the problem in Philippines, we could go across to other markets, and then we could work with governments and other institutions to actually bring in legislation that would make these net zero homes essential, and we could provide the technology and know-how and capacity building and business models that could then be transformed across various geographies as well. We also have had requests from a lot of developed countries as well. So we receive a lot of requests from United States. Some of our videos had gone viral in Europe almost about 2 years ago, and we received almost 3,000 requests from Italy, Portugal, Spain. So we think the market is outside of the developing countries into the developed world as well, where people are looking to shift, not for affordable reasons, but for a concern for climate into these net zero homes as well. So the market could be very, very large as a result. We are starting in Philippines, and in the next 5 to 10 years, we want to be having a global presence, either at a conceptual level or us as an enterprise alone.
What do you say, in how many years do you want to have a global presence, and where does this global presence start?
So we're starting in the Philippines.
Yeah,
and then we think in 5 years, we should be at least in 2 to 3 geographies, but we should be able to open markets where we don't have to be present, but people could take our concept and develop on their own as well. Because the concept that we have is quite agnostic of us as a business and going and developing. It's really a few technologies that we have developed that people could adapt or we could provide to them. And the innovations really in the business model. How do you combine renewable energy and housing into a singular ecosystem, which is financeable and commercially viable? And going to your point on financing, we find today a challenge in financing is that there are funders who fund housing, there are funders who fund renewable energy, but there's no funder that funds both of them together. The exit strategy for somebody doing housing is 5 years, somebody doing renewable energy is 25 years. So they don't know how to match their risk appetite and their capital return appetite as well. And so it requires a little bit of capacity building, funders to think differently and look at it as a combined product. And I think once that has been established, then it could really then scale up significantly.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I think that if you find the right mechanisms, and I also like what you said, that you don't need to do it by yourself. You can just give the concept to other people, and then this is exactly what we need. Everybody's speaking about collaboration. We need collaboration across borders, and sometimes it's not about the ego, it's about building ecosystems. And building ecosystems also sometimes means letting go a little bit, but what I wanted to ask is, will these people who actually then work on your solution also work under your brand and license a little bit from you, or how do you imagine this kind of business model?
So we think the market is very, very large. We don't have to be doing this, or people don't have to work under us. I think they could take this concept forward on their own and expand it as well. And we think that that would actually enable our risk to be reduced. So if somebody else is doing, people would believe we would not have, I mean, today we face a lot of issues being the first movers. People don't know if these houses will sell, if homeowners can live in them, if there are health issues, if they could be financed. But if there are more players doing it, I think the life would be easier for us as well. So we don't think we have to do it, but we could provide technology in the future. We have a few things that we've patented, which enables these houses to be done in a much cheaper fashion, in a much robust fashion, more resilient as well. But that's not the primary objective that we have. And like I said, the market is really very, very large for us to not be dominating just by ourselves.
Okay. Yeah, then we're coming to the last round of questions. And one very important aspect for investors is trust. And we will take this up in the finance session as well. And building trust means also to convince people about the impact which you are creating. And I just wanted to ask you now, each of you, how you would describe the impact and how you also would put all what you're doing into a systemic approach. So, and maybe I will complement with some additional questions then when we go. Maybe we start with Stephanie?
Yep, sure, thank you. I think that trust also begins by admitting where you don't have the answers yet. And for founders on the forefront, when things are being done for the first time, then I think it's trust building to admit when you don't have all the answers, but you're on a path to finding out. In terms of, and I'm just thinking about DNR, in terms of our impact, there's a kind of rather alarming statistic, which is that actually only 1% of the Earth's surface has been like systematically assessed for biodiversity. So in terms of the biological layer of the planet, we have incredibly poor data. When you think about the satellites that are circling around the Earth and sending back amazing high resolution images, giving us so much information daily about the physical surface, but the biological layer it's quite a blind spot. So we can think about metrics in terms of increasing that kind of 1% and actually getting to understand the biological layer of the planet much more than we do today. And for me, that means increased understanding, means increased knowledge, which means the ability to make more impactful, more informed decision-making about how we interact, depend on, and manage risks when it comes to biological diversity.
And out of the information which you provide, people can basically create an action plan how to actually install these more balanced ecosystems.
Yes, I mean, very concretely, the data that we collect can tell you very precisely, for example, the number of endangered species which are in the area that you're working in. It can track rare and elusive species, also invasive species. And then we contextualize that very granular data with the data that comes from the satellites so that we can increase our understanding of the interdependencies between the different things, between different species, between land use changes and species, between pollution and species in that biological layer.
Are there any kind of international frameworks which you would be tapping in and which would be helpful to be a member of, where?
I mean, the data that we collect is very relevant, let's say, for the global biodiversity framework and all of the targets that have come out of that. So countries are thinking very carefully and acting now and beginning to track the targets against the global biodiversity framework. But there's very little data on which they can do that. And of course, those targets trickle down into the private sector, they trickle down into local communities. So having access to more granular data can help those different layers to make more informed decision making. I don't believe that data and technology is the answer to everything, so I do want to point that out. But if we can get high quality, timely, granular data to help us make better decisions, then it's a humble step on a way towards a better, more sustainable world.
And this can create a lot of impact, finally, to restore ecosystems and also to renaturate our human systems so that humans and nature get more in balance. So, Kuni, what is your impact you are trying to create, and what is the kind of systemic vision for?
I think as a startup, I think we should try to raise our voice about our impact in public way and also to corporate for corporate side way. Public way, for example, to produce 1 ton of our product, we upcycle 10 ton of orange peels. That save some of the burning of the orange peels or waste. Also, there are areas that farmers cannot get access to 40% water, but with our polymer, we can still maintain the yield with our polymer. So that helps the income quantity, right? And also fertilizer-wise, we'll be able to decrease the 20% of fertilizer that kind of discussed about, carbon credit discussion in the future, but reduces the production energy side. So that type of showing is important. But when I mentioned about corporate side, for example, as a startup, as you mentioned about collaboration, I've been thinking how I can actually, show, you should work with us when those larger companies are being approached by thousands and thousands of startups every day. Is, for example, one project I'm going to work on this year is, last year we actually won an award by Moët Hennessy. Moët Chandon, you guys drink all the time, I think, in Europe. I don't know. Maybe it's too expensive, but for me at least. But Moët Chandon is also suffering from water scarcity in the vineyard. But if we could support them in the water-related issue, but at the same time, if we could upcycle their grape peels to produce our polymer, they could internalize their thing. But as many of you might know, polymer is actually used for thickener for cosmetics. So natural polymer maybe could get into their LVMH like thickener part. And then they're producing clothes, so maybe we could support them in the cotton field. So if we generate this, if this happens, we might be able to increase their valuation. So they could be incentivized to actually pay me or buy my product or purchase me, I don't know. But so that type of impact I would like to show. But in another word, that could also explain to them about, scope 3. Now they have to show how they produce the raw materials. So that type of public message and the corporate side message, I would like to also think through. And if I may mention, to accelerate one more thing, agriculture sector, in the long run, we're only producing polymer, powder, that's it. But my wish is to get a satellite, and then biodiversity analysis, water retention analysis, and if we could do the subscription model, that's great. But as a small startup and with our current resources, we don't have it. So maybe my question is when I want to merge those company with those small startup companies with those technologies, because there are many companies who are doing agricultural sector in the satellite. There could be margin M&A amongst the startups too, but we don't have cash. How can we do this? Because that could actually accelerate a lot of innovation. So that's maybe like I wanted to ask to the financing model panel that, because I wish we could get that technology as soon as possible. So sorry, I'll end here.
No, it sounds really very interesting. And I mean, as an ecosystem builder, this is what we're passionate about, to find ways to make things happen. And we should maybe talk later. So Prasoon, can you talk a little bit about the impact and the systemic aspects, what Billion Bricks will become, and what your vision is, basically?
So, I mean, I think I'm glad you used the word systemic, because our goal is that we have to change the entire system in order to enable this to happen. If we were to address one part of the problem, it would never happen. So you would find a lot of people looking at maybe materials in buildings, etc., or just financing part of homes, or energy reduction, or insulation, but it doesn't achieve eventually the goal of ending homelessness or building net zero homes and addressing climate change at really large scale level. So we are saying that we need to relook at the entire value chain, from where you procure the land and when you deliver the homes and people live in the homes for at least 25 years when the solar panels are generating the energy. And we want to be involved in that entire chain from the beginning to end, because it's all broken and we cannot fix it if we want to go in and work with partners or collaborators. It's just too much of effort. And therefore, we are tackling all the way from procurement of land, regulations, construction, raising capital to build the projects, construction eventually, materials that will go into it, and then delivering the houses, financing the homes, and then managing the homes for 25 years before we exit the project. So it's a very long chain that we are looking at, but we think that there's no simpler way to do this if we really want to tackle it large scale. And therefore, the impact is very, very deep, but it's very, very complex to achieve as well. So when we go out and speak to people, we speak the language that they want to listen to as well. So most funders and financiers eventually are looking at good returns, and we mention to them that they'll get good returns, and over a period of time, they'll get better than returns that they're getting today from this project on the back of some of the technologies we are developing, etc. So that really becomes the hook. For us as an organization, we are committed to making sure that the poorest of the poor get access to homes. The homes are net zero, not only from an operational standpoint, but embodied energy as well. So we calculate those aspects as well. And because we are creating this renewable energy, which is quite substantial in what we are doing, that therefore stakeholders such as governments come in, they have pledges around Paris agreements, etc., that they have to meet. They don't know how to do it at local government levels. So they automatically, by working with us, are able to achieve a lot of those targets. So to give you a sense of scale, 360 million homes will generate about 3.6 terawatts of energy. Today, the world generates about 7 terawatts of renewable energy. So if every home in the world, which is needed today, was to be done as a Billion Bricks home, we would be generating about 50% more renewable energy. And we would offset about 5% of global carbon emissions from fossil fuels just through our homes. So the impact is very, very massive, but it's a very long journey as well. And therefore, we are tackling it at very, very different levels. And I think what eventually helps, and I think you mentioned about trust, is the fact that I have been pushing on this for very long. I mentioned to some of people earlier, I've lost my hair doing this. I'm getting older as well. So I think that kind of builds in a little bit of credibility that, okay, I've been in the space, I understand, I've probably generated some value and knowledge. And I think that helps to break open much more doors as well. In fact, the last funder who came in for the fact was, I was afraid they came in because I was already doing this for 6 years. The number of people that we had housed was, I think, just around 15,000. So very small number for 6 years, but they like the fact that we are persevering and we are not giving up. And I think that's helping us build trust. And we are hoping that we can maybe accelerate our work from not 5 million, but 20 million, being inspired by you.
Yeah, this is great. Even though you lost your hair, you are very passionate, and this is also very important for entrepreneurs who are passionate. They can easier convince people. And I just wanted to mention that all the three topics would fit also into the area of sustainable cities, and that in Japan actually we are organizing the Sustainable City Summit this year alongside the Sushi Tech Tokyo, which is the largest startup event in Japan, which is supported by the Tokyo Metropolitan Government. And within this Sustainable City Summit, maybe we could even also think of inviting you and some other people to talk about the solutions. Now we have a little bit of time for maybe 2 or 3 questions from the audience. Is there anybody who has a question?
Hello. Hi. Sorry, James. I've got a question for the DNA for you, Stephanie. I think it could be, in terms of the applications for your non-dilutive funding, there's a lot of industries that have to do biodiversity studies anyway. So actually, Prasoon gave me the idea when you're doing a large real estate development, you have to do a biodiversity study anyway, which are quite costly. So to my mind, I would imagine your tech would make that far more efficient in terms of time, hours on the ground, the amount of initial disturbance as well.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at prime forest, you've actually got to have people going into somewhere you perhaps don't necessarily want them to go to unless it's going to be developed. And it would be the same with large commercial sites, mines, factories, coastal defences, this type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely right. We do have a proposal out currently with a mining organization, because at the different stages of the life cycle, from the very early stage of prospecting and deciding where to locate, through the management of that mine and the repair and rehabilitation process, biodiversity monitoring, invasive species management is a significant sort of part of that effort and cost. So that's a very relevant sort of place for us to look. Those companies often give that at least the early sort of environmental assessment needs to be done independently. So there are often sort of independent consultancies that offer that kind of assessment work. And so, yeah, that's definitely sort of a space that we're looking into. Thank you.
Stephanie, this is also for you. I've got a very mathematical mind, and I work in regenerative holistic agriculture. To my mind, as you were saying, check the DNA, I went, okay, we know we've got over 6 billion soil microorganisms in a teaspoon of soil. That would sound to me like if you're monitoring the air above a healthy functioning soil, that's data overload. How do you analyze, how do you break through the 6 billion microorganisms DNA before you get to the stuff that's the few hundred above ground level? Yep.
Great. Thank you for that. I do wish my science co-founder was here with me, because I'm sure he'd answered it in a much more satisfactory way. So the process we do in the air, so even soil microorganisms are suspended in the air. So they are captured in the sensor. And so we are working with end users, with customers, to understand exactly, what sort of, are they interested in the microbial health, or are they more interested in tracking birds, or are they more interested in tracking pollinators and invasive species? So first of all is understanding what the end users want. eDNA, the process that we use to sort of convert the genetic material that we catch into data, does track any species that has DNA. So yes, all of the 6 million microbial, sorry? Yes, yeah, absolutely. And so they can, it depends. You can sequence those more deeply. So there's different sort of levels of sequencing that you do. And of course, the deeper you go, the more expensive it becomes. We leverage metabarcoding to identify the species. And so if all of those 6 billion species have been identified and exist in a reference database somewhere, which they probably aren't. But if they were, they would be identified and can be tracked. But even if they have not been identified in a reference database, you can still track them by their DNA. So I guess it's a question of a use case. I mean, microbial species are also incredibly important. And so why wouldn't we want to understand how they're behaving in different ways, and how, for example, climate or pollutants or different ecosystems impact those populations. So it's a question of how deeply you sequence, and it's a question of what the end user is interested in. But the technology does capture microbials, and we think it's super important to do that. They tend to get ignored in all other biodiversity monitoring techniques.
Maybe in the future you develop an algorithm which actually captures the soil health, depending on also the geographical region, because it might be different from region to region.
Absolutely.
Anyway, we unfortunately we have maybe very short question. One.
I have 3 questions, one for each.
Okay,
holistic approach. So, my name is Chris. I've been working for the UN, the Swiss government, for many years in the field on these 3 domains. So, I'm launching now a new NGO that is bringing what is the pact of the future and what has an impact on local levels. And I think you can be excellent example of that. So, a very quick question for you, Kino. The first one: are you incorporating beyond the Moet et Chandon partnerships also something that could go in the permaculture sphere, because it's a movement? So that's my first question. The second, for Stephanie: are you collaborating with WMO, and are you looking also how your technology could be connected with weather meteo stations somehow to have this kind of DNA, as you were mentioning? And the last one is for Prasoon. Do you also integrate these earthquake criteria in your design, in your work, with your billion bricks? For example, we've been working in Haiti in 2010 after the earthquake, and Switzerland has contributed also to development of bricks. But I was wondering if you also integrate this part on top of the fantastic work that you are doing. Thank you.
So let's have a very concise and quick answer.
Incorporation, no. Permaculture, yes. That's it.
Very good.
WMO, not yet. But yes, weather patterns, because it's air, super important for contextualizing the data that we collect, understanding where it's come from. And yeah.
So today we don't experiment with any new materials. We go with what's conventional and customers want. But in future, yes.
Great. So give a big applause to the panel. And Ingrid.
Call the other side of the coin, and that will be Josie, Thomas, Charles, and Pratibha. Please come to the floor. Josie, would you like to sit here? Yeah. And Thomas, I don't know. We have no here. You have to sit here because of the. Pratibha, yeah, and Charles here, yeah. Perfect. Thank you, all panelists. Thank you very much for coming to discuss this very serious topic that we have heard the innovators explaining all about their hurdles and where they would like to be in the future. And now it comes to how can we actually support this? How can we close the gap between innovation and finance? So I would like to first start with that all the panelists make a brief introduction of who they are and how their organization is working with innovators. And if you don't work with innovators, do you work with finance, or do you work with other mechanisms that can support closing of the gap? Thank you.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me. My name is Charles. I work for the International Union for Conservation of Nature, and I'm the Director of Nature-Based Solutions. And what I do in our center is to bridge the gap between the science and the tools and the practice, basically. And with that, we can now scale up innovation with nature. I can speak more about that, but some of the tools we put out includes the standard that serves as a reference point of what is it and what is it not. And it's very important for investors to actually reference to that and build on the science to make those decisions. The other one are screening investments, but also origination of investments using the tools that we develop.
Okay, thank you. Josie.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. I have 20 years of experience in impact investing, and at that point I noticed that there is a great need for companies to access growth capital, and investors do have an appetite, but they need the right de-risking. So at that point I was asked to become the managing director of a Dutch foundation that provides access to clean drinking water and sanitation solutions. And with our foundations, we started to de-risk investing in water. My other hat is with, I'm also the president of SIFI, the SDG Impact Finance Initiative. It's a Swiss-based organization that provides not only de-risking capital to asset managers that are setting up funds that invest in SDG-related thematic areas, but also provide grant capital, to scale up solutions or do feasibility studies. And I'll speak on both solutions later in the panel.
Thank you. Thomas.
Yes, thank you. Thomas Anderson. I also have some different hats. So partly the IKED hat, which is a think tank in Sweden, which is independent. So we try to work really cross-border, both with governments and the private sector and startups and so on, in an international, going for the cross-border projects to capturing the sort of untapped opportunities. Because we believe on many occasions it's really about people not communicating, not seeing the joint opportunities that you have there. When you can establish that trust, things can happen. Now, apart from that, another hat is the the project here that was up here on the screen, Go Nature Positive. That's an EU project that has been running for 1 year, and the objective of that is really to try to nail down what is required to move from an economy that operates the way it is today, taking down nature and sort of exploiting rather than managing all those benefits that nature generate for the long term. And doing that really requires bringing together stakeholders in another way to be able to, in a way, connect all the willingness that is out there to cater for the future, but overcome also the resistance of the vested interest that's exploiting for today. And that really requires that reaching out and working with the innovators and the entrepreneurs and so on. I'll come back to that a little later, how that's done. Thanks.
Okay, and Pratibha.
Hi, thanks for having us here. I'm Pratibha Jain. I am with Everstone Group, which among our other funds also manages India's largest climate impact fund. It is a fund that benefited from hybrid instruments, getting finance from GFC, where they took the first loss capital, So blended finance does exist, and I can talk about more in the panel. I also wear another hat where I'm promoting within industry trade body, taking the lead on creating a Green Financing Institute. And our purpose is really to find a way of creating at a mass scale level financing, especially green financing that can meet the needs of the global South from global North, but not just financing and not just blending financing, but also we need research and know-how in terms of working with the governments on how to bridge the gap between innovators and financing, bridge the supply and the demand gap, provide insurance. There's no climate insurance available in India right now. I am pretty sure it's the same situation for the rest of the global South. Credit guarantees, debt. So it's creating a whole ecosystem. It's not just providing equity financing, but I think what's missing is the whole ecosystem to promote. What we see is startups, having great ideas, but then they get one round of financing and it doesn't go any further unless we create that whole ecosystem, growth capital included. We are not going to be able to bridge the gap.
Thank you very much. Yeah, this is a very diverse group, as you can hear. So some people are investing in startups, and others are doing it more of a bridging, and others are looking at policies that can actually support startups. So I would like you to say a few words about have you encountered innovations and how would you embed them into your organization? And if you are a financier, then how do you actually select, and what kind of criteria do you have? Because they said, I think that what the entrepreneurs would like to know, how can I be selected? What do I have to show to be there on the radar of the finance people? So can you say something about that, Charles?
Thank you. I want to start by just sharing a personal story.
Yes.
In 2016, I was working in a country in Africa, and I met an investor in actually one of the conference, quite a large-scale investor. They said, I had in your country this beautiful environment for business. I want to invest in hydro energy. I said, absolutely, I can connect you to the Minister of Infrastructure because I had the contact. So it was very easy for me to do that. I did that, and the investor arrived happy, 24 registered, and then went into investment. Said, in the beginning, I have $500,000 to invest in hydroelectricity, and I would serve about 200,000 households, and etc. The numbers were absolutely amazing. And he asked us now as the organization, because I work for IUCN, to help them just assess the risk of that business and that investment. And as an economist, I had to do valuation of the ecosystem services and just link different pieces. So what we found out in that was, in fact, that business was not going to work because the soil erosion in the river where the investment was going to happen was absolutely not going to allow a hydropower plant to be operational. In fact, the 500,000 would have been completely lost in the second year of investment, and because the turbine had to be replaced every 6 months. So we presented, and he said, so who takes that risk? While he had intention to invest up to $5 million, I think he couldn't because there are risks that he had not factored in. And this is where we come in. So I think you asked a good question, where is the gap? Sometimes we meet financiers, they say, there's money, but there are no good projects. And then developers say, we have brilliant ideas, but we don't have money. We had all this from the innovators. But actually, probably they are all pieces coming together. Probably could change that landscape, that ecosystem. How do you bring the science into the making, the data, to inform decision making. But also, how do we factor the natural risks that we never think about when we are investing? So at IUCN, the work I do as the head of nature-based solution is actually to think about what tools that can help developers and investors to make the right decisions in investing, taking into account all those forgotten risks, but that are huge and will absolutely make business not break even ever, because they are huge. They are climate risk, they are biodiversity loss risk, they are soil erosion and water pollution and other things that sometimes it's very easy to do a rapid environmental impact assessment without diving deeper into the real risks. And these EI experts actually sometimes lie businesses and investors because they give you a good report ticking the boxes, but actually the risk is that huge that we absolutely need to make nature an investor or a shareholder in our business model, and we are not yet there.
Okay, very good. Nature as an investor, as a co-investor, of course. So I would like to also hear from you, Josie. I know that from the SDG Impact Finance, you work with also a specific model when you assess innovations. So we'll be interested to hear about that.
Of course, thank you for asking that. So within CIFI, we have 3 windows, and the first window actually addresses to explore what possibilities there are, because we know that there is need of growth capital. And so there's also impact investors that actually want to understand where the opportunities are. So at the moment, we're currently working with Colombia to the Research Institute to see what the appetite is, but also what the risk and the opportunities are in areas where there's very low investments at the moment. I think that, if through the funding that is provided through CIFI, impact investors are much clearer on what they actually want to invest in, and the support that they get through our funding really helps them to explore markets that we have just heard about. And that gives an opportunity for impact investors to embrace different type of sectors that they have not done so far. And I think that's really going to help in mainstreaming impact investing, because, in areas where we need it most, this is where we need to start allocating more financing towards. And if I may, I've worked a lot with, in the water space with startup companies. And our foundation has been provided a lot of grant funding over 20 years. And when I started 5 years ago, what I saw is that many of those companies were not breaking even. And so they had to explore and find different kind of capital. And so I was asking them, how come you're not yet breaking even, but still I see you operating in 2 or 3 countries? I didn't see that before. And then they were telling me, look, the reason why we're exploring different countries is also because, the startup, the seed capital that is available, often provided through foundations and through public entities, is very donor driven. So, the donors and philanthropy really like, pilots. And so they ask us to do that in different countries because we have staff, they need to be paid. If it was up to us, we would access growth capital so that we can actually focus on one country and scale our company, really focused. And at that point, I started to work with impact investors to really tell them, look, this is what the water space looks like. There's kiosk operators, private enterprises, there's water technology that really wants to access those kind of, growth capital allocations that you're able to do. But what I saw is that impact investors didn't understand the market and therefore didn't understand the risk and therefore weren't able to price their investments. So our foundation started then to provide not only the de-risking to those impact investors, but also started to provide capacity building. So we provide capacity building not only to the investors that set up the funds, that then allocate either private equity or debt to companies that actually need that kind of growth capital, but we also provide capacity building to enterprises themselves, because we also saw that at that level, the startups were actually, building the market, building track record, They were very important in that sense, and at the same time they were also servicing the market. So there's a lot of responsibility on companies that, bring new solutions. And so what we saw is that through all of that knowledge that we understood from the market, we were then able to make sure that the investors that we work with are actually understanding, how to allocate their funding. It's not the only solution, private equity, because I think that if you look at markets, there's loads of SMEs that don't know the route to, the international investors providing private equity. And also as a startup, not everyone is able to absorb the kind of tickets that are provided in the market. So what I then started to do is to work with national banks, helping them to start up building their own portfolios. And investors that provide debt and equity to financial institutions in markets where they can actually allocate it themselves. And I think that's extremely important because I would say 95% of SMEs that bring the solutions to the market just simply want to access their own local bank with working capital and small investment loans.
Yeah, thank you. That's a very interesting perspective. I think that kind of new ecosystem that you try to achieve is that's another one. And Thomas, what's your take on this?
Yes, a couple of points. First, I agree very much here that diversity, different competencies coming together, different networks. It's a human kind of problem in a sense that there is a tendency to get together with people who are relatively similar and you can establish trust. And so you have to break out of that and find the other entry points in other networks. This is very important in this field because the world is like divided between those that have the money and work in different sectors and the silos and so on, and a lot of what's going on the ground. Now, on your question, my second point here, you asked for some specific experience. I happened to be in Oman in the Middle East about 10 years ago when there was a person who turned up there, Peter Hoff. I don't know if you heard of him, but he's the inventor of the water box. So it's a way of planting trees, native trees, in a box where you use very little water. And in that context, I discovered when this guy turned up there, that the way we plant trees around the world is utterly wrong. We put the trees in the ground and we pour a lot of water on them, and the root is sitting there and waiting for people to keep irrigating. So for this reason, trees don't become independent. They forever are reliant on irrigation. And in these kind of countries where it's very hot, you may have 50 to 80 liters of water poured on these trees every day. The way that Peter Hoff planted the trees, you use only 50 milliliters of water per day. And this is only for about 18 months, because over that period, the tree establishes its roots and it becomes independent. And from there on, you have an independent tree. It works particularly well with the native species because these trees, they know how to economize water. And there are a lot of wonderful trees in that environment. Now, what happened? He shows up. There's a lot of enthusiasm. The Minister of Environment and other high-level people, they come there and they put, the spade in the ground, they plant one tree, and then they're off. And then nothing happens. And when we saw this situation, and there were some people who had got involved, and I happened to be drawn into it, it was a very painful thing. Although you have so many benefits, and this country has enormous scarcity of water, everybody talks about it, but nobody's doing anything about it. So having a foot in that environment, I had no other way. I just ended up trying to organize things and that this would be overcome. And then various actors come in with funding, and so on. And this has developed since then. I'm still connected with it. And there are these kinds of different forests, that are happening. But now, unfortunately, Peter Hoff is dead. But his son, Wout Hoff, is continuing it. And it's very, very hard work. It's ongoing in about 15 countries with serious efforts. But, scaling this kind of project, getting people to pay attention for the long-term benefits, it's very hard. And now I wanted to make one point here then relating to what you mentioned about impact investment and so on. So there is no question about it. There are a lot of people out in the world, and this has been shown time after time, they have a willingness to actually support health, education, plantations, nature. There is nothing better for your soul and going out there and connecting and so on. There is nothing better. We know it also from young people in trouble and all of that. There is this willingness. However, the instruments are lacking for channeling the resources, and trust is lacking. So a lot of this emphasis in this, what we're talking about in this market, is how to get a high level of return back. There is no shortage of money in this world. We know that. Look at the stock exchange when Donald Trump is moving into office in the White House now, for the time being. Money is flowing everywhere, but to short-term purposes. So in order to have that willingness to pay, there must be more emphasis on the trust building, on the verification, that people can know that the money is reaching out there. The banks, the conventional financial institutions won't solve it. They actually don't have an interest. So there must be another kind of networking and collaboration. And I think this is the place also, Christian, coming back to, how to achieve and so on. We need to build this collaboration and these networks to connect more closely between the people and the institutions that really want and are ready, and the good things going on the ground, because we see there is a lot.
Yeah. So I have a hydro story too. Our fund had invested in one of the largest hydro projects in the country, along with very big investors, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, GA Atlantic. Had come together to invest in this hydro project that would make the state, a very small state in India, energy positive. And we invested, we got the project done. And last year there was a freak cloudburst and the whole project got washed away. So it was viable, everything, financing, very proud of having gotten it done. And the investors have lost all the money and the state has lost the project. And so back to, the need for collaboration, climate insurance. There was no climate insurance available at that time to buy. And if there's climate insurance, the viability of projects would be done by them. And so, the de-risking actually increases by design. And hence, the organization that we are working on creating this, and that goes back to your point on collaboration, creating this network between Global North and Global South of financing and know-how, I think is extremely important, and would love to talk to you about, how do we take it forward, because it also has to work with the governments in North and South. I think, bridging that gap of distrust can also happen with, over time, getting the governments involved. Back to my organization, because when we did the fundraise, we were funded by the government of India, and the UK government were the sponsors for the fund. And I'm talking about 2015. There were no projects at scale for a private equity fund to invest in. And one of the questions we were asked is, how are you going to invest? And the good thing about what we were able to do was we were able to take some of the businesses that were struggling for want of capital. There was this whole waste platform that was going bankrupt that we were able to buy and then build pretty much from scratch. And we've built, 4 or 5 businesses and then acquired other waste businesses into that platform. And so that's provided the financing. And it's a very, very difficult sector. All the sectors that we are in, whether e-mobility, waste, certain parts of renewables, there's unproven technology, there is the government policy risk, financing risk. So when somebody like us at an institution level comes in, it helps to ensure that we can take care of each of those risks. The only caveat is we are a buyout fund. So where we find the biggest challenge is, promoters like Huni and Prasoon don't want to give up that control because, these are passion projects. and it's understandable. But what happens is what people don't understand, private equity comes in to invest and then to exit. And so we work with the promoters, they become part of the management, and often enough in our other funds, which are also buyout models, we sell it back to the promoter to the extent that, they still do the management, and of course they then get in another funder, or they list on the exchange. So you're not really giving up control, but you're bringing in a partner who can then help you scale and, then give it back to you in a better position. So that's how we help.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that this is very interesting. I see that now time. So I would like to ask of the audience here, how many are actually investors? How many invest in projects? Okay. And how many of you heard about the 3 innovators for the first time in this audience? Okay, so there is also an information gap, I think, that these products, these services, they don't reach out. And this is what we have seen in many of that. I've been engaged also in projects with municipalities. And we see that the municipalities, when they are looking for some solution, they are doing land development or urban new concepts. So where do they go? They go to the usual suspects. They don't know about these new solutions. So we need to have a way of working to get more, to have more knowledge about this thing. And there are different ways that we have discussed. I mean, what can policy, what kind of recommendations do we need to drive in order to close this gap between the information, between going to usual suspects, trying something new, and also I think what we heard from Japan here is that why don't disrupt? Why don't just the private sector is very also like what Thomas said, living in their silos. Now you would like to, as an EF polymer, you would like to work with Moët Chandon, which is a manufacturer of luxury goods. So how can we actually, what does it take to make this happen? Because we would like to walk away from this room today with some solutions. Maybe it will be that DNR will become a customer with IUCN. Why not? Because you are the ones that are the International Union for Nature Conservation, so you should actually be using DNR in the future. And there will be other opportunities here. So I would just like to throw out this, and I would like to add you to make the last comment on how you think to see the future. How can we come out of this room with some action? Because we don't just want to talk. We want to make it happen.
Yeah, I think that's actually a better way to conclude this discussion, because I strongly believe that's exactly where the issue is. I think the world is so siloed. We love reinventing the wheel every time. We love wasting money. I did a study 4 years ago. The cost of duplication or repetition with another fellow who was doing a PhD, and we wrote a paper. For governments, it's a lot. For private sector, it's a lot. For venture capitalists, it's a lot. We keep reinventing the wheel all the time. We keep repeating what has happened, and probably it's a waste of time and resource. So this collaboration is quite critical. And one way of doing that is exactly coming together in this kind of gathering. I just wanted to make a last 2 points. We have been doing a very critical market assessment to understand actually why scaling up becomes difficult when it comes to sustainable projects. They start, there's some donor here, then after 5 years, it's completely dead. You only see signpost or something on a website which also end up closing. So we have really been looking at that, and the critical issue there is exactly the lack of that collaboration and partnership. You have investors who seem to think they can walk away without nature, without biodiversity thinking, without climate, and I don't think they would go far. They will come back to the source because nature will pay back, either today or tomorrow, or for this generation or for future generation. So that's quite one of the findings. The second findings, we realized that there is a lot of lack of willingness actually to work together. It's a fact. In fact, a consultant who was doing that study said, Charles, I think IUCN as a union, you have many members, maybe you need to start championing this and with other types of actors, private sector, etc. So the lack of willingness to work together is extremely a burden. And then finally, we keep reinventing the wheel. There's no willingness to actually leverage on each other's. So more or less, the conclusion of the study was the reason that the environmental sector will continue to struggle to get funding is that there's no that willingness to. So I think probably that's my takeaway from this conversation, from this global ecosystem. But I don't have a solution, unfortunately.
Okay.
Hopefully in the future we are creating a center of competence with a colleague here, Mark, who is sitting in the middle here, which would probably be able to offer some of the platforms that can help, and then tools that can help private sector, public sector to come together.
Okay, great. And a new blended finance tool, we hope. Okay, so yes, Josie, please.
So I think that increasingly you see that, impact investing gains attraction, not only with the regular investors, but, in the whole space. I'll give you another example from, the water sector. When I started to work with impact investors 5 years ago, there was hardly any knowledge on, is there even private sector in water supply? So, I come from the Netherlands. When I talk to my network in the Netherlands, there was little understanding. So with the foundation that I work with, I started to, teach and capacitate investors to actually start embracing, investing in water. And that resonated very well. And now impact investors are lining up to get our de-risking and our capacity building skills. So in my team, I have people that know how to structure first loss, but I also have people that have a water engineering background, have worked in multiple countries for a long time and understand the whole water space, what the technology is about, etc., etc. And to have those two components in one organization really helps building, the appetite to increase investments towards water. 5 years ago, there was hardly anything. And if you see that, many of the investors are actually now embracing and, investing in that space, that's really what I was aiming for. Because I think alongside agriculture and renewable energy, I wanted water to become mainstream in the portfolios, and we're quite successful in that. But it's all about knowledge, understanding the sector, understanding the risk that comes with it.
Thank you. Thank you. So we need more knowledge about how to invest and about the specific sectors.
It's very costly for impact investors to start embracing new sectors. So you were saying, they don't know the opportunities. There's many investors here that don't know the individual solutions. But if you work with investors on very specific topics, and they want to start raising capital, many of the capital owners then say, look, I want you to have someone in your team that is actually dedicated to water. So the cost for impact investors also increase. And there's also the perceived risk. Often when we talk to investors and, they want us to explain to them what's the actual risk, they're willing to understand that. But, if you don't understand the complete context and if it's new to you, then it is very costly, and the risk is often not embraced at that point.
Thank you.
It's good you're making these observations on opening the black box of due diligence, sort of. The European Central Bank made a study about 1 year ago about impact investment in Europe on nature-based solutions, and they observed that for the banks today to even look at investing in a particular project, to even consider it, you would have to have at least 10 million euros in turnover, because otherwise it's just not worth the cost of due diligence. That cost is not a given. But it's one of those observations about things are not quite working out right now, not in the right way. If you take ESG, for instance, ESG, of course, has spread around the world, the financial sector. Supposedly about half the world's equity is ESG compliant today. What does it mean? That the institutions, the banks and so on, they are reporting. There is enormous capacity building in reporting. And then, of course, now the pressure is on to take responsibility for your supply chains and all of that from the European Union side. That's not a bad thing. That's a very good thing of trying to make this spread around the world and so on. But the fact is so far, the link to all that reporting and being ESG compliant and all of that, and actual impact, what's happening in the ground and measuring on the ground, is very weak. Now, one other observation on the money that goes into these things. The COP29 in Baku was, it was very dramatic in the media. You had, was it 60 countries walking out of the negotiations at one point and so on. The fight was mainly about a commitment of funding to go from governments in developed countries to governments in less developed countries. The amount that less developed countries requested is about 1/3 of the money that goes into subsidies of fossil fuel today. So, I was thinking this is a reasonable amount. Now, that was politically totally impossible. And you ended up with an agreement that is rather fluffy of what's going to happen, and it's about 10% of the value of the subsidies. So the money that we're talking about that's sort of moving in that direction compared to the other direction, it's really not there. The only way to make a difference is to get to collaboration between, not just those who think the same and work in the same context in the same company. You have to bridge between, the ground and out there, and it has to be people connecting.
Okay, so Pratibha, last comment.
There are various definitions of impact investors. We are an impact investor in terms of the impact we are creating, but the returns we are supposed to give to majority of our investors are commercial. That's really difficult because at one side you've got, unproven technologies, unproven business models that we have to invest in. But at the same time, give double-digit returns, much more than double-digit returns. And it's because of the concessional capital that we can even do this. So I think the biggest demand for somebody like us, the biggest ask is going to be both R&D. I think R&D definitely helps in reducing the cost of due diligence, so that's very helpful. But the concessional capital for sure. And the concessional capital basically helps the companies like yours by having funds like us at scale. We are the only one in the country. The next is like $100 million or less. So for us to be able to do this, and we are right now in the market to raise $1 billion, and we are hoping to get the final approval from DFC, which is again going to be concessional capital. But you need a lot more because the demand only for India is $1 trillion for it to achieve its net zero goals. So I think that's the financing, the support can't, and it just can't be put on philanthropies. The governments have to do their bit. Otherwise, we'd never achieve scale.
I think both. I would like to thank you very much for being here. And I would like to the other panelists also to come on the floor. We will stand up, everybody, so that you can come in here. And then just as the most striking point on this discussion, I think that is that we need to collaborate more. We need to discuss more. And we need to make these solutions visible for everybody. And actually, Pratibha, she said that I have a problem, Ingrid, and that is air pollution in India, but I don't have any solutions to it. So I would like just to ask also you here today, is there anybody has a solution to the air pollution in India? Please talk to Pratibha because we will have a networking session after. And we are here to do action. We are not here to talk. So I would like to encourage you to do that. Okay. Any closing remarks from you, Christian?
Yeah, thanks everybody for being here today. And I hope that you enjoyed the session and you learned something which you can take back. We have had incredible people on the stage, I believe. with new innovations and also with innovative financing mechanisms, with a lot of knowledge, and everything is very complicated or seems to be complicated, but as soon as you start talking and as soon as we start to collaborate, things can be accelerated, and we need this acceleration. A friend of mine who might be here is talking about the acceleration of the acceleration, which we need, because we also need to, basically we need to resist all these forces which are at work now in this world, and people who are working on these positive solutions which create positive futures, inclusive futures, and a collaborative, better tomorrow. That's what we need to do. And now I invite everybody to come into the lounge, and maybe we can exchange some collaborative discussions.
Yes,
Thank you very
yes,
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.